Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. It's your boy D Black with another Raw review. Alright, Raw tonight. It was okay. I mean, I guess they're trying to do as best they can to build up or try to put something together for WrestleMania. But right now, as we're looking at at this card and how they've gotten things together for WrestleMania and the matches, none of them are well written. None of them have any storylines to them. Maybe there's a couple that have some type of storylines to them, but I don't know. This WrestleMania might be a miss. Probably won't be a hit. Might be a miss. We'll see what happens. All right, we start the show off with CM Punk coming out to the ring, and he starts saying that Houston is a wrestling town, and says that he showed up even though he's an old man, and then says that Roman can't be bothered to show up because he's not here tonight. So and then the people start saying calling out for the OTC and everything, and CM Punk says keep calling for him. He might show up, but he doubts it because he's not there. Then the people start booing him, and CM Punk says don't boo him because he gave the news that Roman Reigns, is not there in the building, tonight. So then he goes on saying that when he shows up, when Roman shows up, Roman's most of the time he's late, and then he leaves, early. Then he's putting his chest out like he's, the Rock or something, and everything. And then he says that Roman is not, a champion anymore. That's why he's on Jimmy Kimball and Jimmy Fallon's show, because because he'll do whatever he's told by TKO and stuff like that, and how things are done and stuff. So they put Roman Reigns out on those shows. So they tell Roman what to do, and they're saying that from TKO is putting him out there on those shows and stuff. And then he says that Roman is, then he called Roman, a plastic nepo baby. And then Punk says that he's real because he doesn't have, that he doesn't have a father or a cousin or anybody, that's, in the business to help him, to achieve anything, and everything that he's done. He says that he's done it on his own and stuff. Then he, says that, why did they put Roman? That's why Roman is put on the top, and he said the reason why he did what he did last week by putting Roman through a table, through the announcers table, is because the week before Roman did it to him and stuff. So I guess he said, hey, this receipt belongs to Roman. And I mean, they've been kind of clashing it out and everything. I guess from the first promo that they did, which was a very good promo, and then a couple of ones in between were kind of a little slacking, but it's all getting in line. I think they kind of built this one up and everything, but then something happened, with the Cody and Randy Orton thing, I think, which is taking precedent over, Roman and CM Punk. And then CM Punk says that Roman is not like, the superstar like The Rock is, or like The Rock was, kind of putting the dig on The Rock. We know Rock is a great superstar and everything. Then CM Punk, so says Roman, has failed at playing, football, and he uses nepotism to get into wrestling. And then says Roman, ate dog food. Um, from a weird old man that says that weird old man, treated him like, like a dog, and try to hold him down. And I think the old man they're talking about could be Vince McMahon, because, the story between Vince McMahon, CM Punk, and AJ Lee. So yeah, that that's some crazy ish happening there on that side of the fence. And then CM Punk, says that Roman failed, bad at his first WrestleManias, because Roman's saying that, he's been in a lot of, WrestleManias, which he has and stuff. And then, CM Punk is saying that, of the first 8 WrestleManias that Roman was in, he messed up and he messed up real bad and stuff. And he said that if it was anybody else, they would have been blackballed or gotten fired and stuff. And then he says that Roman, is boring because um, he was chosen, by the system, and that the system, put him in the place to where he is. That's why, he does what he does, shows up when he shows up, and everything. I mean, Roman back in the day during the pandemic, I mean, he held the company together. Him and I think it was him and Drew McIntyre. I mean, they held everything together. Roman Reigns was a champion throughout everything. So I guess we're gonna really see a lot with this. And then after he's saying and all the stuff that he said about Roman Reigns, not the fact that Roman Reigns was chosen, for the system. But CM Punk said, he earned where he's at, and he did everything on his own. He had no help, no family members, nothing like that. Then he goes on and he starts talking about, Pat McAfee. And he says, that Pat McAfee, kind of crossed the line. We start talking about, the business and everything and all that stuff. And then he told, Pat McAfee that, hey, the person that kind of got him in the position of where he was at, as far as being an announcer, with WWE, and what he's been doing on YouTube and stuff, and everything. He told them to get to that person and tell them, to lower the ticket prices because, he went in on how much the ticket prices are and how the people can't afford the tickets and everything. And he wants them to, lower the, ticket prices so everybody can, come in and, and watch the show, you know. And so, he says that Pat McAfee, didn't have the right to talk anything about the business because he doesn't know anything, really about the business as far as, what he can do and stuff like that. But then he says that, Pat McAfee, has a receipt coming, because of the fact of how he did and what he did to Cody Rhodes and stuff like that. Not saying that Cody Rhodes didn't deserve some of what he got and everything, because, we all know Cody Rhodes isn't all, that kind of champion. But I think what Pat McAfee was trying to say and was saying, he said some good words and everything, but I don't think should have been Pat McAfee to be the one to say it. I think it should have been somebody, that has been a wrestler back in the day and stuff, telling everybody, how the wrestling was, back then, having good storylines and stuff like that. And then when it got to WrestleMania, everybody was anticipated going to see WrestleMania. It was affordable to go see WrestleMania and stuff. But nowadays, everything is just outrageous and just crazy. And they just have all this bull going on and stuff. So hopefully things will get better, And then, he goes on to say, to lower the prices, so the people, can come see him, stand on Roman Reigns' throat, at WrestleMania, defeat Roman Reigns and keep the title, and then he says, hey, this is CM Punk, and he improves, this message, and then he walks off, which I thought was a pretty good, which I thought was, pretty decent, segment and everything. They had it together and stuff. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And then you got the segment with Danhausen, you know, and I Show Speed, asking, about the curse, trying to take the curse off of him. And then Adam Pearce, he comes out, and then they talk a little bit and everything. And then Adam is telling him, hey, you know, you were the ones that caused the Usos to lose, you know, the belt, and he was the one that clocked, you know, LA Knight and stuff. And then you know you got the Vision that show up and everything. They say that they got his back and everything, that they'll protect him and stuff like that. And they want him to come out to the ring, you know, with them, you know, because Austin Theory has a match against LA Knight. So ISO Speed walks out, you know, to the ring with him and stuff, you know, and the matches I guess is pretty good. You know, it's Austin Theory against LA Knight. You know, ISO Speed, you know, later on in the match gets pushed into LA Knight. You know, LA Knight goes after him, and then he runs up the ramp and everything, and then the Usos come out, and then ISO Speed is stuck in between, you know, LA Knight and the Usos, and then LA Knight jumps back into the ring. You know, he gets rolled up by Austin Theory, and Austin Theory wins the belt. Wins the match over a roll up. And then they get in there and stuff, and they have I Show Speed, you know, like in the corner and stuff, and they're about ready to give him the 1D. And as they throw him into the rope, Logan Paul grabs I Show Speed's leg and pulls him out of the ring so he doesn't get, you know, the crap beat out of him. And then LA Knight gets on the match and everything, and he challenges, you know, the Vision and I Show Speed to a match at WrestleMania. Now, this is going to be ridiculous because why are they doing this? You know, I Show Speed, he has no experience in the ring. Yeah, he's been training and stuff like that, you know, but it's nothing to the caliber of what's going on. You got to remember the last time he was in the ring, Braun Breaker almost took his head off. So we'll see what happens. You know, happens this time because this is crazy. You know, then you got um, Michael Cole, you know, saying that he's, you know, disappointed in, you know, Pat McAfee, you know, for what he did to Cody, and started talking about him and everything. And then we get Dirty Dom and JD McDonough and everything. Finn Balor, you know, about to go out and have a match with JD McDonough, but then gets jumped by Dirty Dom, and then they beat him down in the ring. Finn Balor, he tried to fight back, but then you know you got the numbers and everything, and they destroyed him, you know, in the ring. And then you get this segment with AJ Lee and Michael Cole, you know, and Michael Cole, you know, starting to talk to AJ Lee, and then Becky Lynch comes in and stuff like that, and you know, Becky tries to put Michael Cole down, saying that he's the, you know, worst announcer ever and stuff like that. And Michael Cole said, hey, he's not going to take none of that. And then Michael Cole leaves, and then Becky starts talking to AJ Lee and stuff, you know, trying to get into her head and everything. And then AJ Lee, you know, tells Becky that, you know, that she's proud of her, and then Becky says that she doesn't have a right to say that she's proud of her and everything. And then AJ Lee goes on and stuff, said no, that she's proud of her for the things that she's done in wrestling, but none of it would be possible if it wasn't for her. As far as AJ Lee, you know, and some of the ladies, you know, back in the day, who set the standard, you know, for women's wrestling and stuff. And she you know, you know, AJ Lee tells her that, you know, the things that, you know, Becky's done is that she did everything, and everything that Becky's doing is that, you know, is because, you know, AJ Lee said she knocked the blocks down where Becky tried, you know, to, to, to get to her to climb them. And, you know, she went through that, you know, took the glass down, she brought the barrier down and everything, that she made it, you know, good. So everything that Becky's doing, she's got to show the appreciation to AJ Lee and the women back at that time, you know, for them setting, you know, the milestone for the women, you know, of today. But then she tells Becky when she goes home and she's tucking her little girl, in bed and everything, and then ask her who's her favorite wrestler. She says she's not gonna say Becky Lynch. She's gonna say AJ Lee, and then AJ Lee gets up and she walks away, and Becky gets horribly mad and stuff. And then we get the match with Bayley and Lash Legend. Um, this match, I mean, it was okay. I mean, Lash Legend is doing her thing in the ring. You know, I had to say she's learning. She's getting better and stuff. Bayley, they did their thing, and then all of a sudden during the match, um, Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss, they come out and then they attack Nia Jax and everything. Lash goes out of the ring and everything. She starts, to help Nia. Then she gets in and she goes for a superplex on Bayley and stuff. And then somehow Bayley reversed it and everything. And she landed on top of Lash Legend. And as Lash was trying to kick out, Lara Vaquera was holding the leg down, and then they get the pin 1, 2, 3, and Bayley wins the match and stuff. And then they did a thing about Hulk Hogan. There's gonna be this show talking about Hulk Hogan, and it comes on this month, I believe, somewhere I think on the 23rd, maybe of April, somewhere around there and stuff. But anyway, then we get the segment with Seth Rollins. You know, he's coming out saying that he's been waiting, 6 months, to hear from the people, to hear the people, sing his song. And then, they start singing his song and everything. He's in his grasp of it and everything. And then he says, he doesn't have a history, Gunther. And he says Gunther, may have some business somewhere else. He said it could be with Paul Heyman or something like that. That was his suspicion. And he said that the only two things that he's worried about, you know, is that he has two visions, and then one is to win back his title, and number two is to destroy and take the vision down. And then he says that he handed Brock Lesnar on a silver platter to Obafemi. So he set that up and everything. So I guess him and Oba was talking, and I guess however it got set up. And I think that's just one of the greater highlights, you know, for WrestleMania. And then as he said that, then Gunther comes down and everything. He tries to attack, Seth Rollins, but Seth Rollins kind of gets the better and everything, and they're out, fighting and everything. It turns out to be a brawl, a brawl, a brawl, a brawl, a brawl. Again, and then backstage you see Gunther, and Paul Heyman, and Paul Heyman, thanks Gunther for trying to taking Seth Rollins out last week because he did put Seth Rollins to sleep and stuff. But anyway, Gunther then looks at Paul and he says, that he owes him, but he owes him so much more than a thank you. So I wonder what Gunther means by that, what's going to happen with that. Then we got Stephanie back here. She's saying that Liv, by using the bleach blonde stuff that she uses, must have gotten her head, and did something to her, leaked into her brain, and then has something because she's made herself look stupid or start saying stupid things and stuff. And then she said Liv wants to play dirty, and she also can play dirty herself. Then calls Liv, a brainless bee. And then she said that she talks a lot, she says a lot, you know, but she says nothing that anybody can understand. And then says Liv runs her mouth, but then she claims to run Raw. Then says Liv is um, scrambling for her purpose. and all she can settle for is to solve her daddy issues, with oh man, with a sorry excuse for a man talking about Dom, who's jealous of his own dad's success, which she's talking about Rey Mysterio, success, and Dom is, jealous of Rey and stuff because they still haven't been seeing eye to eye for a couple of years now, and that her purpose is to, inspire. Well, she's saying Stephanie Valkyria is saying that her purpose is to inspire, girls, everywhere, you know, to do things, on their own, make their own path, you know, no matter where they're born or where they come from. Then says Liv, when she's here, on site, you know, basically saying that Liv saying that if she sees Stephanie on site, they're finna throw down. Then Stephanie basically says, where she comes from, you're not gonna see it, you're just gonna feel it. You ain't gonna see it coming, it's just gonna be there and it's just gonna happen. And she said that goes for her and Roxanne Perez, because Roxanne did jump her last week and stuff. And then she said, Liv, won't be getting the title, you know, and stuff at WrestleMania, that she's going to defeat um, Liv Morgan at WrestleMania, and because she's going to take her to a place where nobody can follow. It says, Liv, welcome to her Inferno. So I guess I guess this is gonna. I mean, the way that they're putting it out and how long this has been going on with, um, Stephanie Valkyria and Liv Morgan. I think this is gonna probably be one of the better matches of all the women matches. I'm hoping it's good and stuff. And then we get Penta, Javon Evans, Dragon Lee versus Los Americanos and everything. The OG hits the cutter on Rayo and everything, and they win the match. And then Rey Mysterio comes out, he congrats, Penta for doing what he's been doing as far as, the IC champion, and then putting the match, the IC title, in a ladder match at WrestleMania. And then Ray says it wouldn't be the same if he wasn't involved, so he involves himself into WrestleMania. So it's, instead of 5 men being there for the ladder match and everything, it'll be 6, including Rey Mysterio and stuff. And then you got Oscar, talking about Io Sky and how she, you know, ruined everything for her and stuff like that. Talking about she's trying to get Kyrie Sane to turn on her and stuff like that. And she's tired, of Io Sky. So everything that Io has tried to take away from her, that she's going to do the same thing to Io and stuff. So she never said where this match is going to take place at and stuff. So I'm thinking that it could be a match that could be set up for WrestleMania. I don't know. Stay tuned. And then we got the match with Io Sky and Rhea Ripley going against B-Fab um, and Michin. And this match, it was okay. You know, um, you know, um, we got Jade, in there. She gets involved. She pulls Rhea from the ring, and Io rolls up B-Fab, for the win and stuff. And then Jay gets in. She clocks Io, from behind. And then they start beating her down and stuff. And then Michin goes out and she gets the Akendo stick. So it's being brought into the ring. And then Jay, she tries to get back into the ring. But B-Fab and Michin, they grab her and hold her into the corner, while Jay gets the doggone kendo stick and beats the living tar out of Io Sky, and there's nothing that Rhea can do. And then after she does that, she gets out of the ring. B-Fab and Michin let Rhea go, and then Rhea goes and gives Tinder to Io Sky, and she's holding her like a little baby in her arms and stuff, which is crazy and stuff. Then we got Finn Balor. He said Dominic Mysterio has woken up inside him something that has not been, you know, not been leashed in a while. You know, him and JD McDonough, really did something to Finn Balor when they jumped him. So now I'm thinking that Finn Balor's talking about bringing the demon out. So that ought to be interesting and stuff. And then we get the Judgment Day, with Dom worried about what's going on as far as Finn Balor is concerned, and JD McDonough, trying to calm him down and saying that, you know, don't worry about Finn and everything, But then Dom said that he has something on his mind that he wants to go and he wants to go talk to Adam Pearce about. And so as they leave, Liv Morgan talks to Roxanne Perez, and she's talking about Finn Balor. She said, that she knows that Finn Balor is the one that, brought Roxanne into the group of the Judgment Day, and she wants to know, where her head is at, where Roxanne's head is at. And as Roxanne's trying to talk to her, then Stephanie Vicarious, she comes and she drops both of them. She hits them so hard. I mean, it was brutal and stuff. And then she takes Liv Morgan, she throws her into a flat screen television and stuff. And she left both of them just laying and stuff. And then we get, Triple H coming down to the ring and stuff. And I think it's going to be the Oba Femi and Brock Lesnar, for a contract signing and stuff, and then Paul Heyman, he's coming out and everything. And then they get to the ring, because Paul is saying that this match between Obafemi and Brock Lesnar, is going to go down, in history, and that it was going to be, probably the highlight and the best match, and it should have been the main event and everything like that. And then Obafemi's music plays, and he comes out, and then Brock Lesnar jumps out of the ring, and then they just brawl. It was a brawl fest, a brawl, a brawl, a brawly brawl, brawl. And they brawled, and they brawled, and they brawled, and then they brawled, and then they broke it up and everything. Um, so we're 2 weeks away from WrestleMania, and it's actually looking dead. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't even know how these matches are going to be set up for day one and day two. It's just going to be, I don't know. It's just crazy. WWE is not what it used to be. It's actually, yeah, they're losing themselves, and hopefully somebody will come along and save it and stuff. I mean, you're hearing Pat McAfee saying that um, him and Randy Orton are going to change things and save it. Then you got CM Punk saying that he's going to save it and stuff like that. The only way it's going to get saved if they get somebody that knows how to write storylines and stuff and put great matches together, and it's not Triple H. All right. But anyway, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, leave a comment. Let me know how you're feeling. Let me know if you agree or disagree on what I said and everything. Okay, thank you for watching. God bless, deuces, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you.